Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, Toby and I are going to be reviewing everything that we learned from Game Week 3 in the Premier League and reviewing some of the biggest matches. It's been hectic so far, there's been a lot to learn. How have you been finding the opening games of the season, mate?
Yeah, I feel like it's been maybe all over the place is a bit strong, but it feels like it's not really much to draw from. I think these first games, it feels like a lot of teams are being a bit inconsistent. It feels like we're seeing sort of changing starting lineups and systems, and a lot of teams have been going from game week 1 to game week 2 to struggling to playing well, and now back in this game week. Yeah, it's difficult to take any patterns, I think, out of the first 3 game weeks, besides maybe Liverpool just winning all three and being top of the league, I suppose, is the most consistent thing so far. But yeah, that's the only thing I feel like I can really take out of it at the moment. How have you found it?
I think it's been really enjoyable, actually. I think it's nice the fact that it's unpredictable, you're not sure what's going to happen because I've been going into every week thinking, okay, this is going to happen and then this is going to happen, but then it's just absolutely not the case. Every team, players, managers are surprising us. And like you said, Liverpool win every week, and it seems like Wolverhampton Wanderers lose every week at the moment. But we're going to be talking about both those teams coming up. But of course, we're going to be starting off with Liverpool 1, Arsenal 0. Both of our clubs that were involved built up as kind of a early season decider, one that could maybe dictate the rest of the season in terms of tempo and confidence, and in the end decided by a moment of absolute brilliance by Dominic Szoboszlai when he scored that free kick. But the one thing for me that I think I learned from this game was the fact that maybe on the pitch, but maybe also off the pitch, is that there is a lot of pressure on Arsenal this season. I think I didn't expect going into the game for there to be that much talk, that much discussion, talking about Arsenal, about they have to go to Anfield, they have to win. To think about going against one of your title rivals or a team you think you're going to be title rivals going into the back end of the season, and think you have to win away from home in game week 3 of the season when the sun is still shining, it's still August, it's still the summer holidays. I just thought to myself, the whole narrative around it I thought was quite perplexing actually, and I think the fact that Arsenal have finished second 3 years in a row now, I think it's accumulated the pressure, and I think there's just so much pressure on this Arsenal side at the moment that I think actually we're overreaching and over analysing everything. So I think what I've learned is that there's a lot of pressure on Arsenal going into this season, a lot of pressure on the fan base, the players, the manager. But I think actually what we need to do is we need to just lean back a little bit and go, you know what, let's just see a bit more before we're making these ultimatums and saying this team is done, this team's over. And I just think it's all a bit too much at the moment. And do you think that's fair enough? You're an Arsenal fan, you're in the sphere, you maybe see a bit more than I do. Do you think there is that pressure on Arsenal this season?
Yeah, it definitely felt like in this game it wasn't the third game of the season, like you said. It felt like it was later down the line. The way it was built up, that this was going to be, this is almost a title decider in August, which is crazy. And I think the reaction as well to Arsenal's lineup, there was quite a lot of negativity, especially with the midfield that we played of Marino, Zubimendi, and Rice. It felt very defensive, and it felt quite timid from Arteta in that potentially he was going there just to try and get a point, try and keep it a quiet, calm game, which it was until the 80 or so minute. And I think as well, because at this point in the season, yes, Liverpool had got 6 points from 6, but it felt like this was a time to really go and attack Liverpool at Anfield, and that their defence hasn't looked amazing so far this season. It felt like the opportunity to go there and try and play and win, which I think if this was later down the season, you would not be saying that. But I think with it being so early and Liverpool maybe not finding their rhythm as well as they can just yet, maybe Arsenal should have gone for it a little bit more. And I think part of that pressure, and in terms of, is Arteta just settling for where Arsenal at the moment, and maybe that game potentially sums up how Arsenal have sort of finished seasons over the last few years.
Yes, but you're talking there about finishing seasons, and like I said, it's only game week 3. It's actually mind-boggling because Arsenal have definitely gone out in the transfer window and they've made the signings that they need to make and recruited players in the positions they needed, but it's about utilising them in the right way. And I've seen a lot of people talk about intent with Arsenal, about they need to go out with the intent to win games, and I don't think that Arteta sets out Arsenal with the intention to lose a game of football. Of course he doesn't, but does he need to be more attacking? Does he need to take the handbrake off? I've seen a lot of people say and use that expression. But in terms of what he could have done maybe in terms of the lineup, I wasn't surprised when I saw Mika Marina starting instead of Odegaard, who picked up that shoulder knock against Leeds. I wasn't surprised when I saw Martinelli starting on the left wing, because he's had previously done really well against Liverpool and at Anfield. But I suppose the question mark could maybe be after a good first half performance where they controlled Liverpool, got the ball more often, they created more chances, even though they weren't necessarily more clear-cut chances. Once Liverpool started the second half quite well, could Arsenal have brought on Eze a bit quicker? Could they have brought on Odegaard on a bit quicker? Did they need to be a bit more proactive in the game? Because it seems like as soon as Arsenal made those changes, which are maybe, you could argue, 10 minutes a bit too late, did Liverpool then see that and go, no, we recognise your changes, and actually we're going to see the fact you're going to become more open, and we're the ones who are going to take the initiative in this game and not you. Do you think that's a fair criticism, Arteta, or do you think it's you don't really know, so you can't really say that he should have brought in his players earlier or later than he did?
Yeah, I think it's a fair criticism, and I think you can criticise with those points without saying, Arsenal aren't going to win the league again and Arteta's a bad manager. And it's just small tweaks that I think could make the difference in games. Like you said, I think Martinelli, again, I don't think had a particularly good game, especially coming up against Szoboszlai at right back, who is far from a natural right back, who did play well there. But I think with a little bit more of a challenge, we could have seen a left wing have a little bit more joy there. And I think Eze could have been that person to bring something, especially with the midfield that Arsenal were playing at the time, where it felt like there was that space on the inside channel where Eze really likes to operate. With Arsenal having a little bit more of a flatter midfield, it would have been nicer to see him come on. It would have been nicer, I think, to see Arsenal come out of the break a little bit more aggressively as well. Like, we had that control in the first half, and that's something that we have never struggled with in the last 2 or 3 years, especially in big games. We've got a really good record in those big games, but it is just striking when that moment is there, and once that's missed and passed and Liverpool are coming a little bit more into the game, it is almost too late, and then you do have to sit back and sort of take what you've got out of fear of losing it. And without that free kick, it probably would have gone down to a 0-0 really stale game with us just trying to see out the point, probably, even though there was an opportunity for us to potentially go and win that game, even if it never came.
If that's every other team in the Premier League, apart from maybe Manchester City, I think the narrative coming out of it is Arsenal played really well. They controlled the ball, they played the game they wanted to play, and they quietened the Anfield crowd. However, they lost to a moment of brilliance, and that can happen. And then that's it. And then you move on, and you can kind of accept that. But because it's Arsenal, and I think this is the point I want to make about the pressure, the fact that because it's accumulating season after season after season, it gets to the point now where people are saying they have to win, where I don't necessarily think that's the case, because sure, this game could be the difference between Arsenal and Liverpool and where they finish in the league position, and hopefully not for Arsenal fans' sake, is that it's not the difference between them finishing first and second again. But it could be, but we won't know that until the end of the season. And only on reflection of the whole season can you go, this is where the title was won or lost. Or maybe you can tell in the moment if it's a really decisive moment. But it's far too early for this to be super decisive. And the fact that Arsenal and Liverpool will have to play themselves again. They shall have to play Manchester City again as well. So I think, all in all, I think that the pressure on Arsenal is above and beyond what it needs to be at this moment. And I don't think that we've even seen the best of I don't think we've seen the best of any team so far this season. How can you with the limited amount of game time that we have seen? So I think everyone needs to just calm down a little bit, take a little bit of a chill pill, and Arsenal will be a really good team this season. They will win lots of games of football. They will do well. But it is just, can they get over the line? And so far, based on this one game, they haven't proven they can't get over the line. But they also haven't proven that they will. But the one game winning against Liverpool doesn't necessarily mean you will either. So I just think it's all a bit too much at the moment. And I think that everyone just needs to calm down around talking about Arsenal. But there was another team in this game as well. It was Liverpool. And, I thought they won like champions, if that's a fair expression to say. Do you think that was an accurate description of how they went about it?
Yeah, again, I think it was like you were saying about Arsenal in terms of that there were positives for them to take out of the game, that they defended well, controlled well, and maybe things that we've complimented Arsenal on before. I think Liverpool were in a pretty similar situation. It felt like both teams played similarly and should have positives talked about in both sense. I think Liverpool defended pretty well, looked very solid, especially in the midfield, and something maybe that didn't happen in those first two games. I think they weren't set up very well defensively in those first two games, whereas in this third game, it felt like they had the right balance of sitting back and controlling and also being able to get forward, especially in that second half when they turned it on a little bit more. And it was a good performance, and it was like the cliche of winning when you're not playing at your best. And I don't think Liverpool were attacking at the best or flowing at their best, but because they had that solid defence and those solid foundations, they were able to get a 1-0 win, and that 1-0 win courtesy of an amazing free kick. But that free kick was set up, I think, from the way that Liverpool were playing before and stopping Arsenal really doing too much themselves as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that Szoboszlai, who played really well against Newcastle actually the week before and did a fantastic job at right back there in that away game, I think again in this against Arsenal, I think is phenomenal. I think him against Martinelli in a straight sprint just is a no contest. Martinelli wins all the time, but the fact that Liverpool never let that happen too often in the game, and when they did, it was so far out wide that it enabled players to get back in time and help out Szoboszlai if he needed it. And then in terms of going forward, I was thinking to myself when I was watching it, Szoboszlai needs to get himself into that midfield because he's playing that well. And Arne did that by actually inverting him a bit like you would with Trent Alexander-Arnold in years gone by. And he actually did really well. And yeah, it was a fantastic free kick. One of the skills that you forget Szoboszlai has because of the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold was taking all the free kicks when he was at the club. So looking forward to seeing a few more of those if he's got them in his locker, because that was one of the best free kicks I've seen in a good while now, because you don't often see them nowadays. And yeah, I think Liverpool, in terms of what you deserve and don't deserve in a game of football, I think I'm trying to get away from saying, I think this team deserved to win the game, unless it was so overwhelmingly clear to everyone watching that they deserved to win and absolutely battered them. Because it was a bit more 50-50, I'm just going to go, actually, Liverpool got the 3 points, and actually that's all that matters. And especially considering the fact that a lot of people were talking about how defensively they've been so poor, conceding 2 against Crystal Palace in the Community Shield, 2 against Bournemouth, 2 against Newcastle. But now they kept a clean sheet, and they kept a clean sheet against arguably the second best side in the Premier League, and well, definitely the second best side if you consider what happened last season and where they finished Arsenal. And now they kept a clean sheet when it really matters. I think you have to give Liverpool and Arne a lot of credit, and especially I think Konate and Van Dijk, I think they were absolutely imperious in this game as well. And in terms of going forward, I don't think Liverpool are going to stop. I think they're going to probably get even better, and I think that's something everything needs to be watching out for. But also, Arsenal the same. They will also be getting better despite the fact that they lost this game.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Liverpool will have wanted going forward. They weren't going to keep conceding 2 goals a game for a while, but I think to be able to get it, especially in this Arsenal game, is a big statement, and it's good for their confidence as well, because they could have quite easily gone into this game it being a little bit more open, and maybe we would have seen this clean sheet waiting for a little while longer. It's almost like the opposite of a goal scorer, just getting one and then seeing them fly in. So yeah, it was a good result for Liverpool to take, and I think they can take a lot from this game that they didn't have in those first 2 games, and hopefully over those next few weeks they'll probably be able to find a balance.
Let's move on then to Tottenham Hotspur 0, Bournemouth 1, which was a result that I could see happening going into the weekend, but one that I didn't necessarily think was going to happen because of how well Spurs have been playing under Thomas Frank in the first 2 opening games, plus also the UEFA Super Cup against PSG. I thought to myself, I think Spurs are probably going to make this 3 wins out of 3, but they didn't, and actually Bournemouth were the much better side in this one.
Yeah, it's a strange one to have looked at before, like you said, because I think if you would have said this Spurs lineup, their front 3 in their midfield of Kudus, Richarlison, Brennan Johnson, Bentancur, Palhinha and Sarr, if you would have said that was the Spurs lineup coming up against Bournemouth last season, who were really, really good, I think we would have said Bournemouth could definitely do a job and take 3 points here. Whereas now this season, with the changes that we have seen to Bournemouth, especially in their defence, some question marks over maybe how they're going to perform this season, Thomas Frank going into Spurs and how well they have played so far, it definitely felt like Spurs should be the favourites in this game. But overall, when it came round, but Bournemouth completely dominated Spurs, and I think they were lucky for it to be only 1, especially Bournemouth playing away. I think they were incredible. I think they were brilliant. They had under 40% possession, and I think that is what really suited them and how they were able to thrive in this game. Was we saw Bournemouth back to their best, back in those transitions, wingers flying forward, Evan Nilsson being that perfect target man for them, and it was a real statement win for Bournemouth that last season wasn't a fluke. They're not reliant on certain players in their team. They are just a fantastic side. They really are, and they were so good to watch. Really, really, really like this game.
Yeah, I remember thinking when I saw the opening game of the season, Liverpool versus Bournemouth, and I thought to myself, wow, Bournemouth going forward still look absolutely incredible, and that'll probably make sure that they keep stay in the Premier League if anyone was ever worried about that. But not only that, seeing the defensive performance on the weekend against Spurs, I then thought to myself, yeah, not only could they definitely stay up in the Premier League and make it comfortable, but they could actually be where they were last season, or if not, maybe even better. I think the fact that the recruitment, you haven't really missed the players that have gone. The fact that like the Truffert, Diakite who's come in, they've just hit the ground running and started really like a house on fire. I think is really a credit to the recruitment at Bournemouth and also the players and the way that Andoni Iraola plays. And the fact that they kept a clean sheet and kept Spurs to only one shot on target when Spurs were at home, I thought to myself, wow, that is in terms of, they were mainly doing it by attacking Spurs, but the fact that they kept Spurs at bay, so quiet with the players that you said that they had on the pitch, I was like, I couldn't believe what I was actually watching. I thought to myself, wow, this was a really top-notch performance by a side who were coached incredibly well. And I thought to myself, yeah, Bournemouth could easily finish in the top 10 of the Premier League again this season. Was that the vibe you were getting, or were you thinking to yourself, you know what, this guy could even maybe go for something like Europe? Is that crazy to say?
No, I think the opportunity is definitely there. I mean, we're not sure what's sort of happening with Aston Villa, especially at the moment. We're not really sure how Newcastle are going to be performing. It seems like both of those sides who were breaking into that traditional top six and getting those European places may not be having the seasons that they have had in the past. So that opportunity for a team like Bournemouth, a team like Brighton to maybe go there and get European football. We've seen Brighton get it and get Europa League, and I think Bournemouth have the opportunity to be able to do so as well if they can play week in, week out like they did this week. And I think that consistency is the one that maybe is where they'll struggle and drop a little bit short. But especially in this game week, yeah, I think Semenyo and Brooks on the wings were just superb. So good. It was so good to see David Brooks back in that side as well. And even him going into the side, you see that it's Cliver is on the bench. It seems that their new signing, Amin Adli as well, coming on. And I think when you compare that to what Spurs had going forward and maybe why they had so little chances and why their possession was so stale, was that they didn't really have any players willing to pick up that ball, drive and create much, which I think is where Spurs really struggled. I mean, their midfield three was extremely defensive. I'd say almost that's a three of sixes in Bentancur, Palhinha and Sarr. And then you've got Kudus, Richarlison and Johnson, who out of those three, you'd probably say Kudus is the most creative, whereas a player like Brennan Johnson is somebody who is looking for that pass into them and maybe to break past the back four. And yeah, it still feels, despite Spurs having a decent transfer window and lots of signings, it still feels like with the injuries to Kulusevski and Maddison, where is that creativity now having to be picked up? Who is picking that up now? I'm not too sure in that Spurs side, really.
Yeah, you make a good point there. And when you win against Manchester City with a workman-like midfield, and you go one-on-one with everyone, and you go man marking, you go tight, and then you be brave, that is wonderful to see because, you know, years gone by, no one went one-on-one with Manchester City, and then that works perfectly away from home. And then when you play against Burnley in game week 1 and you dominate the team, you dominate possession, you dominate the chances, win 3-0, easy win. Is this where Thomas Frank is really going to have to earn his salt and make sure that he can get Spurs to compete with the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City? The sides where they're going to have a go against you, and they also have the quality to hurt you, because Bournemouth, I'm thinking Brighton, who are coming on to next as well, these sides who have really great attacking players and are willing to have a go with you and go punch for punch, are they the ones that Thomas Frank really needs to figure out how to play against? Because in this game, you could argue there's a lack of creativity, argue there's a lack of creating enough chances, but really, I think you could argue that Spurs was second best in every department, and that is something which isn't really good enough, but also one where, because of the bad season Spurs had last year, one where you maybe could forgive if they win a few more of those games down at the bottom of the table. So where do you think Thomas Frank needs to go about trying to fix this, and how do you think he could have gone about it if he went about it in a different way?
Yeah, I think in the games like this and with the opponents like Bournemouth, it is those transitions maybe where Spurs Those defensive transitions for them, I would say, is where there seems like there's still a bit of a gap with, like they had against Manchester City. Manchester City just have so much of the ball, and they did in that game, that the transitions weren't particularly a worry for Spurs. They were able to sit back a little bit and try and break against Manchester City, and those quick breaks aren't something they would have had to worry about. Whereas in this game, that is really where Spurs just completely dominated. They were winning the ball pretty high, winning it in the midfield, and it was opportunities where it was a 4v4, and Bournemouth were just absolutely running at them, and they didn't really know what to do. And maybe we would have seen this a little bit more if Burnley had a bit more of an output in that first game. Whereas because they were sitting so deep and Spurs were just able to control the game and control the ball, they were able to not have to worry about that and play with a little bit more freedom. And yeah, I'm not sure really how to fix that. I mean, they're playing with 3 defensive midfielders. They should be able to break that up. Maybe it's more... maybe it's that rest defence setup that they don't quite have. Maybe trying to win that ball when they lose it a little bit quicker is maybe where they're lacking. I'm not too sure. I maybe need to see a little bit more against teams like Bournemouth, and maybe it'll become a little bit more obvious. Was there anything that you noted?
No, it's pretty much everything you said. And just looking at the team there, I think to myself that really it's only Kudus in that starting 11, and all the other 10 players were there last season, and that was the side who finished 17th in the Premier League. So maybe, if anything, it was maybe a good thing that they lost against Bournemouth. I mean, obviously no Spurs fan would want to lose any game of football, but maybe because 2 years ago with Andrew when he came in, he had that amazing first 10 games, and everyone kind of got swept away in the motion. Just a little bit to be like, no, okay, this is a much improved and hopefully going to be a better coach Spurs side, but maybe they do still lack some of the deficiencies that they had last season in terms of defence, in terms of transitions, in terms of injuries. They've got a few injuries at the moment, and that's still going to take a little bit of working out and need improvement this season, and it's not going to be a complete change. And that's the only positive I can take into it, but I'd probably say that this was probably not the game to do it, considering it's going into an international break, and our Spurs fans have that for another 2 weeks before they can try and make it right. But I think there's definitely signs that this is going to be a better season for Spurs than last, especially in the league. We'll just wait and have to see how well they do. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, this is still a long way to go, and I think you can't overreact and still brush past those first two games where they looked really good and they looked a lot better. It's not going to be a perfect season, and I think that's what they're looking for this season, is just an improvement and a decent improvement from themselves last season, and I think that's what they will get.
We'll move on then to the next game, which was Brighton and Hove Albion 2, Manchester City 1. And I was watching this game and I thought to myself, I didn't know how in that first half Man City weren't more than 1-0 in front. I think Haaland had a couple of chances. Well, I think Haaland had a few chances. I think Haaland actually could have had a hat-trick in that first half. There's one where he's running through on goal. He didn't strike the ball properly. There was a header as well, which was a great save by Verbruggen. And I thought to myself, I think Man City could be more than one goal up. But going into that second half, I was bewildered by how good Brighton were. That was not a surprise, but how Man City were unable to cope with how good Brighton were. The 4 changes they made in the 60th minute, the quadruple changes, it just seemed to change the momentum of the game completely. And from there, it looked like Manchester City were the side who were happy to take a draw, and Brighton were the ones that are going to be disappointed. And so I learned a couple of things, but the one that I really want to highlight is that I think I knew this, but now I know for certain, is that Rodri being back and being fit isn't going to fix everything. He played this game, he played the whole 90 minutes, and obviously he's got that amazing record of 70-odd games of never losing when he's played for Manchester City, and obviously that's now been broken. And actually I thought that from what I saw from Man City in Game Week 1 against Wolverhampton Wanderers, that 3 of Reinders, Gonzalez, and then whoever they have further in midfield, in the attacking midfield, they're going to be fine. Plus, when you add Rodri into that as well, they're going to have so many great options. But actually, it was Brighton on transition, anytime they won the ball back, countering attack at Man City really quickly, that I thought to myself that maybe they don't have the legs still, which I thought was a bit of a worry. But then they also lack a little bit of experience inside. The average age of it was only 25.9 of that Man City starting 11. The older players were the likes of John Stones at the back, who's 31, Rodri, who's 29, and Bernardo Silva, who's playing in the attacking midfield role, switching between him and Reinders. And apart from that, they really didn't have too much experience in that side. It looks like Edison is going to be leaving. It looks like Gundogan might be leaving. Ruben Diaz is always never really fit for an entire season. And I thought to myself, well, based on that performance, that Brighton thoroughly deserved the win. They were the better side in that second half, and they created more chances. They dominated Manchester City, and James Trafford, I think, in so far this season, has had the second most saves to make of any goalkeeper in the first 3 game weeks from Manchester City. That is incredibly worrying, and they're going to take a little bit of time to get it right with the new players, the younger players. And my takeaway from that is I don't think Rodri's going to go out and fixing it all. Do you think that's something that you've noticed as well, or do you think that's maybe too harsh and we need to wait and see because he's only just coming back from a long-term injury?
Yeah, I think that first half was a performance that we see and expect from a Manchester City with Rodri, in quotes, when they're at their best. And like you said, when it was only 1-0, it didn't feel like a game where we were going to look back and be like, oh, those chances Manchester City missed in the first half. Because they were so dominant, it felt like this is just going to be 2-3-4 in Manchester City once they get that second one, once they carry this on, basically. I was so surprised by the change at halftime and how the game completely flipped. I mean, just looking at the XG, Brighton 0.04 in the first half to Manchester City's 1.31. Second half, Brighton 2.24 to Manchester City's 0.53. Complete flip. And that second half felt like a performance if they had it last season. We would have been saying, with Rodri in the side, this wouldn't have happened, where they were being completely destroyed on the transition. They couldn't deal with Brighton's runners and pace and the way that they were winning the ball deep in Manchester City's midfield, 4-on-4 situations, again, like we were saying for the Bournemouth Spurs game. And yes, I think City, they benefited from Rodri's control in that first half, and I think that's what helped them dominate the ball and dominate the game. But in that second half, I think it didn't expose anything about Rodri. I think it just exposed that Manchester City do still have those frailties on the transitions. Having Rodri back in the side, who is good defensively and can read the game fantastically, isn't just a plaster you can stick over where Manchester City struggle. And I think probably at half-time, Pertzler, he would have wanted Brighton to play in that second half as they did in the first half. That they still, the possession didn't change. The possession was almost identical between the halves. It was just the way that Brighton were pressing and attacking that it flipped. And like we said, Rodri played both halves, and Manchester City played complete opposites. So it's definitely not an instant fix him being back.
No, absolutely not. And the fact that it was the amount of times that Brighton got between their backline and midfield, especially on the counter-attack in that second half, whereas it felt like Man City should have had an answer, or they should have stopped the attack before it got to the penalty area, but they never really did. And it felt like at times that Man City had 3 and Brighton had 4, and Man City had 2 and Brighton had 3. And I was just watching the game almost perplexed of how is this happening time and time again. It's just a case of let Man City have the ball, let them work their way up the pitch, and as soon as they lose the ball, quickly we're going to go on the counter-attack. And with the players like Welbeck, Matoma, Rutter, Minter, they just had so many players who just outran Manchester City, and I think that's a bit of a worry. And I've seen some people online talking about, are Man City going to be ready for this Premier League title race? Liverpool reinforcing, Arsenal reinforcing, are City really there? And it's not a takeaway or a learning that I think I can make only 3 games into the season. I think it's far too early to be saying Man City are out of it. But it is one where I'm not sure what Man City we are actually going to be seeing because, like I said, they're a very young side. I think Pep is changing and rotating his players a lot. I'm not quite sure what the best starting 11 is, which is something I think they need to figure out very quickly because when they won the treble season, you knew exactly who the starting 11 was week in, week out, not a problem. I'm also thinking Mateus Nunes at right back is... I mean, we saw Szoboszlai playing right back for Liverpool, so to say a midfielder can't do that is that you can't talk about it for one player and not for another. But I think he needs to be doing better. I think he shot himself in the foot just putting his hand up in the way completely and it was the most obvious penalty I've ever seen for a handball, even in this VAR world where everything's a bit more in the grey. And also Trafford last week, who shot himself in the foot with that pass, which led to the Palini goal to make it 2-0 for Spurs. They're constantly making mistakes. They're not quite getting it right. I mean, Ryan Nuri's great going forward, but he's getting caught out defensively, especially on transition. It seems like Haaland's the only one who's capable of scoring goals at the moment, and everyone else is just it's not quite, the jigsaw pieces are there. They're all really good, but it's not quite clicking at the moment. And Rodri's not going to be, well, my takeaway from this is Rodri's not going to be the glue that fixes it all. And maybe last season wasn't just a case of Rodri's out. Oh no, what are we going to do? It's Rodri was out last season, but there were a few more issues, and I think Man City are going to be looking at potentially a bit of a harder season, but there's no reason why they still can't be in the title race. But I have to say, the sooner Phil Foden comes back, is fit, and gets himself fit into that midfield, and if he can see the form that we know Phil Foden can produce, then we might get the Man City that could see them challenge for the league title again.
Yeah, I think it doesn't really feel like Manchester City are fixing those issues that we saw last season yet, and I think that's highlighted, like you said, with Nunez and Aït-Nouri. They struggle. They struggle in defensive transitions out wide, and I think Brighton exposed that really well. And it feels like those two players are exactly the sort of players where that's their weakness. I think Nunez is not a good defender at all. I think Aït-Nouri is a fine defender, but he is one of the most attacking fullbacks in the league probably for the last 10 years. He's basically a winger, and he is a fantastic player, but doesn't really help with maybe where Manchester City struggle. And just to talk about Brighton a little bit as well, just to give them credit, because it wasn't just Manchester City being poor in that second half. They still had moments where they made chances themselves. Brighton were just so good and so efficient and knew exactly what to do, when to do it. They knew when to commit men forward. And even when they were committing men forward, like you said, it was still only sort of that front four were really, really bombing forward. They still were not going mental. They weren't having their defensive midfielders fly forward. They weren't having their fullbacks fly forward. They were able to control the game without the ball, which I think was so clever of them. And I think those subs, especially of Gruder and Rutter, when they came on, the game just completely changed. And Gruder getting that unbelievable last goal, the way he just sat down at Trafford, and the Manchester City defender, I can't remember exactly who it was just so nice. And yeah, for Brighton to get that, I think is really big for them, because similar to Bournemouth, I think we weren't exactly sure how they were going to perform this season, and I feel like it's always quite difficult with Brighton to know. But again, when they pull out performances like this, there's no reason why they can't be on pushing into those potential European places as well.
Yeah, it would have been unfortunate for them if they went into the September international break without winning a single game up to that point. I think it would have been, I think they played better than the points that they deserved up until that point. And yeah, I think, yeah, the stadium was absolutely rocking when Gruder scored that second goal. It was, honestly, the camera was bouncing. So it's really nice to see that. I think Brighton know they have the players, they know they have the quality, they know they can do something. It's just about, can they do it consistently on a week in, week out basis, because they're capable of beating the best teams. But when it's the 3 p.m. kickoffs on Saturday and there's no pressure, there's no eyeballs, can they do it then? And if they do that, then they could be a really, really exciting side. We move on then from them to Manchester United, as they won against Burnley 3-2 at Old Trafford. And Toby, you're going to take us away with this one. What did you learn from this game?
Yeah, I think on paper, and if you look on social media, and despite the fact that Man United won, I think this could quite easily on the surface be seen and be taken as a punching bag for Manchester United, that they scraped a last minute penalty against Burnley. They needed a penalty, they had no goal, especially after the defeat to Grimsby in the week on penalties. But I think that would be unfair, because I think United did deserve to win this game. I think they played better than they have in the last few games, and it's probably the best they have played since the Arsenal game, where again I think they were impressive. And yeah, even on paper, I think they dominated this game, and I think it would have been unlucky for them not to win this game. I think the two chances that Burnley had, they scored pretty much. They were maybe chances that were gifted to Burnley, especially through Bayindir. His save for the second one, which essentially just fell to the feet of Anthony, and he could just put it into an open net. And yes, there's still a lot of problems at United that were maybe highlighted in this game through their goalkeeper, through some of their defending, potentially through some of their finishing as well in this game. But I think overall, it's at least a positive step in the right direction for United. And I think if they had gone and dominated this game and lost it, I don't know what would have happened to Man United. I think it felt like it couldn't get much worse after the Grimsby game, and I think maybe a defeat this weekend could have been in terms of momentum for them in the league. But yeah, they were able to get the job done in the end, and I think they definitely deserved it.
Yeah, you at Man United at the moment with Ruben Amorim, you just don't want to be a story. You just want to go under the radar. You just want to go about your business with as little pressure as possible, because anytime they lose, the pressure mounts. And after that Grimsby game, it was, yeah, people for buying for blood after that one. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Man United did deserve to win the game. I think they were the better side. They dominated possession. They created more chances. It's just they're never convincing, are they? They always get over the line in games, but they never do it with any authority, and you never feel comfortable when you watch them, especially if you're a Man United fan. You just think to yourself, God, how on earth have we got away with that one, or how on earth have we got out of jail here? And you want something to be a little bit more convincing, but I think some of the player performances were quite convincing in the fact that I think Brian Mbeumo is clearly going to be a very good player for Man United. I mean, there was no doubt about was he a good player or not. It was just, can he handle the pressure of playing for the club that is Man United and all the eyeballs that comes with that? And so far, that's proven that he will absolutely be fine. It also seems positive in some of Mason Mount's performances. The fact that he did have to come off at halftime was a little bit worrying, but he did play really well in the game so far, and it looks like he, especially with the games coming up they have against Man City and Chelsea, and with Cunha's injury as well, that he's going to play a big part in Amorim's United going forward this season. And also, I really like the fact that Amad Diallo on the right wing-back position. I think he's great going forward, and he links up play with Mbeumo really, really well. So I think there are a lot of positives, and we're learning more and more with each game that goes on. I just do also think that we're learning a lot about which players maybe aren't good enough and some of the deficiencies as well. I mean, some of the goalkeeping that we've seen from Man United in the last 2 years, let's say, has not been the best, to put it kindly. And it looks like they're going to be signing another goalkeeper, which is a really good thing because they're desperately going to need some help. But I also don't think they help out the goalkeeper in the fact that sometimes, I mean, especially in this game against Burnley, the 2 goals that they scored, they were kind of from like, they were from moments where you thought, you know, I'd have enough men back, it's a set piece, they'll be fine, just clear the ball, clear your lines and regroup and you'll be fine. But then every time they just seem to not do that, the ball always seemed to fall to a Burnley player. And you think to yourself, how on earth have they done that? And just confusing. And so I think they need to work on something, but I'm not sure what that something is. I think it's just being a bit bolder, a bit braver in defence, maybe. But apart from that and signing a new goalkeeper, I think, yeah, they're a long way away from where they want to be, but there are some positive signs, aren't there?
Yeah, I think that defence, what they're lacking is that conviction. And I think maybe that there's no fear, I think, for attackers going to play Manchester United at the moment, and I think they're all great on the ball. I think it was Yoro, De Ligt and Shaw playing in this game who are all very good on the ball and they can control the game, and I think their positioning is pretty decent. I don't think any of them are bad. It just feels like there's nobody in that back line who is leading. There's nobody really in there who's maybe in moments where Man United are on the back foot a little bit that's thinking, right, we need to step up and get this out and reset. It doesn't feel like that's quite there for Manchester United yet, anyway. I mean, their backline seems to be changing quite a bit and maybe isn't solidified just yet, and those characters I'm sure will come out a little bit more. Yeah, like just to follow on from what you said about Mbeumo as well, I completely agree. I think he really stepped up in this game, and I think maybe we were able to see him shine a little bit more with Cunha's injury. It felt like Cunha has been the one leading Manchester United's attack, and it'll be a big blow him going, depending on how severe that injury is. But yeah, if you've got a player like Mbeumo being that sort of next man to look to, that's just brilliant because he is a quality player. Just one last point I wanted to ask you about as well and discuss is Sesko. I'm very confused about what's happening with him at the moment. It felt like the Grimsby game was a really strange game to give him as his first start. I know it's probably trying to ease him into it, but I think away at Grimsby, if anything, is a worse game. I feel like he would have been so much better starting in the Prem, potentially. He didn't come on to the 72nd minute in this game, despite Cunha's injury, despite Mount going off at half-time. And is Amorim being a little bit too soft and trying to sort of usher him into the side a little bit too slowly? I mean, even in the penalty shootout, he didn't take it to the 10th one. It feels strange, and I know he's a young player, but I would have thought maybe he would have had a little bit more impact, especially with the way Man United have been playing without him at times.
Yeah, so I saw Amorim talk about this post Burnley in his press conference, and he said that Sesko had cramp at the end of the Grimsby game, which is why he took the 10th penalty, because he didn't want him to take one. It wasn't Sesko's decision; it was Amram's decision. And then in the fact that because of that, as a direct result, he couldn't bring him on till later on in the game against Burnley, and that's fine. You know, if that's a reason, that's valid. Okay, but I will agree with you. It is a bit weird because if Sesko, and it feels really hard saying this because he's such a young player from a different league, joining the Premier League, so physical. He's still so young, coming for a lot of money. But if Sesko was good enough and you needed to win that game of football, you would have brought him on earlier. And I do know what you mean. It is, the management of him is interesting, but also at the time that he was also angling for a move from RB Leipzig, so maybe he didn't have a full preseason, maybe he wasn't completely fit, and that could be the case. But like I said, if he was good enough, he would 100% be starting and he would be playing week in, week out. I think it's difficult because United are in such a poor position at the moment that they sign players and they're trying to sign young players so that the future looks bright. However, they need those young players to deliver now, and it's the manager's job to find the happy medium. And what I think is, at the moment, Mount and Mbeumo and Cunha are probably a better front three than any two of those three and Sesko up front. And especially if you start him and it doesn't go well and he gets under a bad run of form, and then the crowd gets onto him, and then the media gets on top of him as well, that could break him. And I don't think that Man United are in the position now where they can afford to break another striker, because if they do, there'll be 3 different summers. They've broken 3 new strikers from 3 European leagues in Højlund, Xerxes, and now Sesko. And if that happens, where on earth do they go next? So I would much prefer Amram to be cautious with Sesko, but because of how cautious he's being, maybe I'm starting to wonder, is it because he's maybe not as good as we thought or think he might be? And if that's the case, Man United are in some real trouble. But maybe with Cunha's injury, maybe he'll start the next game. If Mount did come off at halftime as a precaution, maybe he could be injured, maybe Amram's downplaying that, you never know. But the next game's being the Manchester derby away from home, and then Chelsea at home at Old Trafford, next 2 games. If you've got a new signing, and if he's good enough, you have to play him. If he doesn't play him, he might not be good enough for now. And I think the proof will be in pudding in terms of how many minutes he'll play.
Yeah, I think you don't want it to get to the point either where it's Manchester United playing badly and you've got an £80 million striker sat on the bench and you're asking why is he not coming on. You're getting more questions and you're almost putting pressure on him even though he's not able to prove anything and do anything, which I think is unfair in itself. So yeah, I would be very surprised if he doesn't start the next game, especially with the potential injuries. And I would be a bit disappointed as well as a Man United fan because things aren't clearly going well without him. So you may as well try. Even like I feel like the Grimsby game wasn't a fair match for him to start as his first game, and maybe Amram was thinking, oh, this is going to be an easy game, we're going to walk it. But it's such a foreign game. Do you know what I mean? In terms of maybe a new player going into any club from wherever they've come from to go into that game. That's not the type of football and the way that Manchester United are going to be playing week in, week out either. So yeah, I would be very, very surprised and a bit disappointed if he doesn't start the next game, because how long is it going to be if it's not?
I'll agree to an extent. I'll say not the next game because it's a Manchester derby away, and you don't want to lose to your rivals. But weirdly, Manchester United have more points than Manchester City at the moment, even though it's just 1. I'd say the game after that, the game week 5, if it's at home against Chelsea, and you should have the injuries to Mount and Cunha, and he doesn't start, then yeah. And if Xerxes starts as well ahead of Sesko, that I think will highlight a lot. So I'll say I'll go 1 game. I'll give him 1 more game than you. Give him a bit more time. But yeah, it's got to be soon. It's really got to be soon. We'll move on to the next game, which is Wolverhampton Wanderers 2, Everton 3. And I think there was a lot to learn from this one. I think especially from the Everton's perspective, which I think is what you're going to go for.
Yeah, this was one where it felt like this was the opposite of what we expect and what is good and maybe bad about Everton. I mean, we expect them to be very solid defensively, maybe not the most exciting going forward, especially under David Moyes. They are normally pretty conservative. But this game, defensively, they were pretty bad. I think we can just get that out of the way to start with. I think both of the Wolves goals, I think Everton defended pretty poorly, and they felt like lapses in concentration, which is something that we definitely don't expect from Everton in the way that they're set up. But to get the boring negatives out of the way, going forward, Everton were so good. They were so fun to watch going forward. That front four was unbelievable. I mean, you've got Beto with a goal, Grealish with 2 assists, Dewsbury Hall with a goal and an assist, and Njai with a goal. And the Njai goal where he linked up with Dewsbury Hall and Grealish was involved, and you had Beto really pushing back with his back to goal against the defence. And it was such a quick move, so slick. That front four is really, really nice, and there's really nice balance in there as well. And I was just not expecting it at all. I thought maybe this would be a bit of a boring game. I think probably would have expected maybe Wolves to have more possession. Everton maybe could snatch a win on the break. But yeah, it was an absolute goal fest, and Everton looked so different. I mean, just those signings of Dewsbury Hall and Grealish seems to have completely changed their attack.
Well, actually, I'll pick up on the fact that you said that they conceded goals poorly, and completely agree with you on that point. But I'll also say, if Everton conceded goals in the last few seasons prior to this one, you'd immediately think to yourself, okay, Everton have lost the game, because their game was so built on having a solid defence and then nicking a goal, maybe 2 if they're lucky, and winning the game like that. Whereas if they conceded a few, you'd think to yourself, okay, Everton lost the game. But now, it was an off day for the defence, but now you have the attack that can complement that and compensate and go, all right, you're having an off day, we'll just score 3, and score not just 3 like tap-ins or set pieces, but it was really well-worked goals between some really exciting players that would take some top-quality defenders to stop and would score against most other sides in the league. So I actually think the fact that the defence was poor meant that we got to see this attack in display, and actually, it was really fun to watch. Like you said, I mean, talking about Man City earlier and talking about where they're looking a bit deficient and the fact that it looks like it's just Haaland at the moment who's going to be likely to score them goals. Then you've got Jack Grealish, who started like a house on fire at Everton. All of a sudden you think to yourself, where was this Grealish under Pep Guardiola? And then also Kieran Dewsbury Hall, who just couldn't get a minute for Chelsea whatsoever. Signed as a player for 30 million, and now a year later left for 25. And you think to yourself, well, that's bad business. Might not have worked out. But then he just, again, like Grealish, hits the ground running. And then you have Illiman and Dye, as well as Beto from last season, who are just continuing to hit the ground running. And you think to yourself, under David Moyes, Everton, new stadium, new players, it just looks incredibly exciting at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And not to put a damper on it, but I think, like Everton, I think they defended poorly. I think Wolves were not very good defensively in this game again, and I think they really struggled and made Everton look good a lot of the time. But it was really good for Everton to see that opportunity and go for it, and like you said, not have that regular game plan of maybe where they do rely on that defence. And I think they probably could see that. Well, they did see it really early on, a really early goal, and they didn't just sit back. They saw there's an opportunity for them to really go and get some goals in this game and maybe get some confidence as well, and took it fantastically. And I think to be able to add that to their game is going to be good for Everton. And again, it feels like a lot of the sides this year. What do we expect from Everton this season? Are we just expecting an improvement? Are they really going to be pushing into that sort of higher mid-table? With the team they have, it's certainly possible, and it maybe feels like they've underperformed throughout the past few seasons. It was a really good performance, and a performance that Everton, I think, needed. Even though when you look at the score 3-2, and Wolves still did have some good chances themselves, this was a game that they could have lost on another day, I think.
Yeah, they absolutely could have. But I think the reason why they didn't was because of the fact they were coming up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. And just to touch on them, the only side who have lost every game so far this season, only side to not pick up a single point so far. And you were thinking at home against Everton, who depends on what you thought of Everton, if you thought they're going to be good this season or if you thought they're going to be just a little bit better than what they were. You would have thought to yourself that, okay, this is something that maybe Wolves could get something from it, but they haven't. And you're starting to think to yourself that maybe are Wolverhampton Wanderers in for a season of hurt, and maybe could they be one of the sides to go down considering how well some of the other newly promoted sides have done. And it is a little bit worrying so far for them and Vita Pereira's side. Do you think that it's one where they could just easily win the next game and we wouldn't be having this conversation, or do you think there are some worrying signs up ahead for them?
No, I think that it is a little bit worrying for Wolves, and I still think they've got some good players in there. I think Andre, he didn't have a particularly good game, but I think is a player who may need to step up for Wolves. I mean, you've got Minetzi, who he got a fantastic assist for Hwang in this game and looks like a good player. And Strand Larson injured. Is he leaving? He's put in a transfer request. He had a bid rejected by Newcastle. Is he going to be off? It feels like there's a few players in there who last season and sort of start of this season are below that level of importance of Cunha and Ait Nouri, but it feels like Wolves haven't had anyone step up in their absence just yet. Whether that needs to be the whole team and sort of their floor is raised, as opposed to the players who maybe aren't playing too well, need to step up and become a little bit more important in the side, or if it's their best players really need to step up and fill the void that Cunha and Ait Nouri maybe have left on them. I'm not too sure which way it will end up going for Wolves, but I think if they don't have either of those things come true, they are unfortunately just looking like a little bit of an average side at the moment, and one that I don't think anyone is going to be particularly worried about. I mean, because if you played Wolves last year, it wasn't all about Cunha for Wolves last season when they played well. But a team looking at Wolves are thinking, how do we stop them? If we can stop Cunha, that's probably our best bet. Whereas now it feels like there's not really anything specific about Wolves to really worry about, which is not a good sign.
No, absolutely not. I think it's worrying signs, but we'll have to wait and see for a few more games. And before long, I think if it carries on like this, I think we will be talking about Wolves as maybe being a side that could go down. Move on then to the last game, which was Nottingham Forest 0, West Ham United 3. And like you said right at the beginning, Toby, that it's been so unpredictable, you don't know what to expect. This was absolutely one of those games. Going into this game, I thought to myself, maybe, you know what, maybe I'll bring in Chris Wood to my FPL team. Maybe I'll captain Morgan Gibbs-White, because there's no way that West Ham are winning this game. They've been so poor so far, losing 5-1 to Chelsea the week before. I just didn't see it. Absolutely didn't see it. And they completely surprised me with the 3-0 win. And my learning from this was, I said prior to the season starting that I think Jared Bowen is going to be so important for them. And the reason why I didn't have them going down is because I think Jared Bowen will get them goals, will be a talisman, and he'd help to keep them safe. But actually, after watching this one, I think Lucas Paqueta could actually be just as important. I think he was absolutely phenomenal in this game. He was my man of the match from it. He scored the one goal, the second goal, which was a penalty. But I think his all-round game was absolutely phenomenal. He had 82 touches in the game, the most of any player. He made more passes in the final third than any other player. He won 11 of his duels more than any player. He won possession 8 times more than any other player. And I think that not only on the ball but off the ball, I thought he was fantastic. And if West Ham are going to have a good season, then not only Jared Bowen but Lucas Paqueta are also going to be crucially important. And at the time of recording on the Monday, he hasn't left. So he's kissing the badge. He's keeping his word. He's staying at the club. And I think he's going to be just as important as Jared Bowen for them this season.
Yeah, Paqueta's a player where I think West Ham have been playing well, not directly because, but a big contributing factor is because Paqueta hasn't been playing particularly well at times. I think it feels like he hasn't. When he first signed, he felt like it made a real impact. And when he was playing, he was almost unplayable. And he almost had that move to Manchester City where it felt like, okay, this is a great signing for Manchester City because he is such a talent. And it feels like we haven't really seen that side of him again. Now seeing it in this game, it sort of shines a little bit more light onto West Ham and that things aren't going to be all doom and gloom. If you can have Paqueta playing like that week in, week out, that is that impact and that star player that is just a complete game changer for them and something that they have missed. On top of that as well, I think they had quite a few changes in this game, West Ham, in how they played and how they set up. I mean, we saw Kyle Walker-Peters starting at right back. They went back to a 4-back. It wasn't a like flying wing backs. It was a little bit more conservative. They held on to that game for 75, 80 minutes before really sort of going for it, which was a good game plan for West Ham. They looked a lot more solid. and as you said, like with Chris Wood bringing into your FPL team, I had Diouf, the left back for West Ham, second on my bench, thinking I want him far away from my team as possible. And luckily with some injuries, he did end up coming on for me. But yeah, it's I'm not sure if West Ham are going to be like this in their next game. I have no idea. But it was a really, really good result for them to get and something for them to build on, I think.
And it was really encouraging as well, to the fact that they brought off the bench players who made an impact, and like Somerville, who came on, I was electric down the left-hand side, but also Callum Wilson, who got the third goal, looked really, really sharp when he came on, and who's hopefully going to be putting his injuries behind him for the sake of West Ham. And the fact that they not only have the starting 11 but have those players off the bench, it shows that, you know, they do have Premier League quality players. As long as they turn up on the pitch and perform, Potter just needs to put them in a side that, into a team and structure that lets them get the best qualities out of them, and they will be fine. West Ham will be fine, and it's one where, yeah, there's a lot of talk about could they go down, may they struggle a little bit, but really they have the quality, they have enough quality to be staying in the league, and they should be staying in the league. The issue is will they, and you know, football is a very unpredictable sport. When we talk about Nottingham Forest, from a side who in Game Week 1 were winning 3-0 to now a side in Game Week 3 who are losing 3-0, it seems like we've had more than 3 games with Nottingham Forest. It feels like we've had half a season already, because talks about, will Nuno go? Is Marinakis, the owner, happy with them? In terms of the football they played, I was quite disappointed with them. I think on the weekend, I expected a bit more from them. I expected them to create more chances. I thought that Sangare was awful for that second goal, which they ended up, which he made the foul for the penalty. Although I do think the referee made an error in the build-up, but let's not talk about referees today. And I do think that Chris Wood didn't create enough chances for Chris Wood today. I was a bit disappointed with them, especially at home, especially against a side who maybe they thought they were going to roll over and be quite easy. But you can't take any game for granted, and it just felt wrong. It didn't feel like Nottingham Forest, and I was very disappointed with the performance on the weekend.
Yeah, it's a funny one for us, because I think despite losing 3-0, they still defended well, and despite the fact that they haven't kept a clean sheet all season, I think their defence is still definitely their strong point, and I don't think there's any real issues to think about that. I mean, all the West Ham goals, all 3 of them, came so late in the game that I think we can't ignore how Forest maybe played for 70-75 minutes of that, in terms of that they defended well and kept West Ham pretty quiet. But yeah, like you said, in that first half, Forest, they should have been much better, and they should have not gone for it more, because they did, but they needed that creativity. They needed somebody to really help break down West Ham and to just create some more chances for them, for Forest, because they didn't really have many in this game, and it just felt a little bit stale, and I think Forest have struggled going forward a little bit. I mean, their pre-season, I think they only scored 1 or 2 goals in 6 or 7 games. And how has that changed from last season? Maybe their transitions aren't as easy. Teams see them as a little bit more of a threat compared to last season, when they were able to sit back and really go on the break, and that's where they really shone through players like Hudson-Odoi and Elanga. And maybe this season, with teams sitting back against them, being maybe a little bit more worried about Forest and knowing how good they can be, that attacking structure that they have needs to adapt, and maybe will take a little bit more time. It's not just going to be following on from exactly how they were playing last season.